Welcome to Careers in Discovery, your window into the world of biotech leaders. On each episode, we interview the industry's leading executives to understand how they built their careers, what they've learned along the way, and the advice they'd give to their younger selves. When it comes to brain health, few people have dedicated more of their career to moving the field forward than Rafal Kaminski, Chief Scientific Officer at Angelini Pharma. In today's episode of Careers in Discovery, Rafal shares the journey that's taken him from medical school in Poland to leading R&D at UCB, Roche, and now Angelini. Along the way, Rafal and I talk about his deep commitment to neuroscience, the lessons from building research teams in very diverse environments, and how to transform a 100-year-old company. I am once again delighted to be here on Careers in Discovery, and today I'm with Rafal Kaminski of Angelini Pharma. Rafal, welcome to the show.
Hi, Tom. Thank you. Thanks for the invitation. Really delighted to be here.
We're delighted to have you, Rafal. So I was really interested to talk to you to start with about Angelini a little bit and about the work you're doing there. I think it's a fascinating company. Obviously, you know, over 100 years old, which not many biotech and pharma companies can say, and involved in lots of interesting things. As the Chief Scientific Officer, tell us a bit about your view of where the company is, what you're focused on, all those kinds of things.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, so Angelini Pharma is indeed a company with a rich history, over 100 years, as you mentioned. And it's part of a broader set of industries called Angelini Industries. That's a holding company with the largest company within Angelini Industries. And, fast forward through this 100 years, the company has been very successful in bringing different products to market. But really, the last 5-6 years has been the transformation period for the company. And that's something that excited me and many other colleagues. And it really, the transformation started in 2021 when the company acquired Arbel Therapeutics, and with it, a very innovative and quite efficacious anti-seizure drug. That created the focus of the company in what we call brain health space. It hasn't been entirely, foreign space to the company. Yes. Because actually one of the most widely prescribed antidepressant drugs was originally discovered and developed by Angelini some 50 years ago. Okay. So the company has a rich history and rich heritage in R&D. So it's really great for me to lead that space within Angelini.
Yeah. And in a company this diverse, because as you say, so from an R&D point of view, you're very focused on brain health, but of course the company has specialty care, consumer health products, all these kinds of things. As the Chief Scientific Officer, where do you spend most of your time? What takes up your days?
Yeah, so that also relates a little bit to my background and the reason I joined Angelini. So indeed, it's the brain health where I spend most of my time, most of my energy, and that's an area of growth. And I'm very happy to contribute to that space. So my focus really is in building the pipeline, make sure that it's progressing with success. So that's been something that kept me busy and keeps me busy and excited. And over the 3 years that I've been here, we managed to really strengthen the pipeline, both through bringing in external innovation and partnership. And I can speak about that a bit more, but also starting new projects, new ideas coming from our talented scientists within the R&D organization. So that's what keeps me busy, and I work hand in hand with our business development colleagues. So we have a really tight bond on that axis.
Yeah, I'm sure. And it's an interesting set of spaces that you're in. You mentioned the anti-seizure medication. You mentioned the antidepressant, and I think that the sort of the whole field of mental health is in a fascinating place, right? Because it's becoming more and more high profile. There's more and more kind of acknowledgement of mental health as a real, area of concern. But it's difficult, right? There's difficult endpoints. It's difficult to see efficacy and things like that. So these must be things that you and your team are tackling on a day-to-day basis.
Well, absolutely. It's been difficult, but that's what excites us and motivates us. This is an area of huge unmet need, partly because, as you say, it has been so difficult as such to bring in drugs to market, to development. Yes. So I think that's an area that we want to tackle, and being already in epilepsy quite successful, this is where over the few years we built our reputation and standing in the field, but we want to build around it, and part of our strategy is to focus on sort of adjacent diseases or diseases that would be mechanistically close. Or comorbid diseases. So that sort of drives our strategy. We want to focus on mechanisms related to neuronal excitability and neuroinflammation, as we believe those are quite fundamental to a spectrum of brain health disorders. So that's where, keeps us busy when it comes to pipeline focus. But it also, and I think I'm very proud because of that, Angelini is highly committed to advocating, raising awareness about brain health through different initiatives. One such initiative that I think is worth mentioning is the Headway, an annual report that was established in 2017 with the European House Ambrosetti, where every year we bring together expert, patient advocates, very, very broad spectrum of stakeholders to discuss priorities in research, fight with stigma associated with mental health and brain health diseases, and really create quality data available to broader public. And incidentally, just earlier this week, we launched what we call Angelini Chair in Brain Health at the Ghent University in Belgium. Apparently, this is the first brain health chair in Europe.
Okay.
So we're really excited to support this, I think in keeping with our overall mission. And so we actually quite sort of early adopters of that brain health concept as such.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of, it's something that we see as a trend with companies that have been around longer. They tend to have a longer term view on things, right? And they tend to have a more holistic view. I think the biotech industry can be very short term at times, and lots of reasons for that. But it sounds like that at Angelini, you're doing a lot of thinking about the patient population as a whole, different ways to help patients, not just the therapies, although that's obviously the core of it, but other ways to impact people suffering from these conditions.
Absolutely, and that's part of our purpose. We care about people's health, so not only patients, but people. And in that sense, this brain health concept is also interesting because it encompasses not only disease states or people with diseases, but general healthy population as maintaining that brain health to achieve full potential. So yeah, those things go hand in hand.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's an important concept. And I know you spent the majority of your career in neurology, particularly epilepsy has been a theme, and you've worked in this area for a long time. And I suppose outside of the brain as well, there's sort of a more awareness recently about how lifestyle is impacting health over time, and certainly that's true in brain health, right? Interesting to get your thoughts on kind of where we are in our understanding of that as well.
Yes, absolutely. There's more and more data and research available in that space. Of course, there are clear risk factors that can be mitigated, that can be altered to minimize the risk of developing brain health condition. You mentioned could be diet, could be physical activity. Those are probably the most known. But I think what is really exciting and emerging now with the advent of modern technologies is our ability to measure brain function or elements of brain function in a long-term way, and see, observe those trends and maybe intervene earlier than when the disease starts. So that's a fascinating area as well.
No, absolutely. I could ask you lots of questions about this, Rafal, because it's strange. Since I turned 40, I've become a lot more interested in longevity and the things that affect that. And I don't know if those two things are related, but but I really want to talk a bit more about you and your career and how you got to this point as well. And so I always like to take it back to the very beginning. You trained as an MD and got your PhD as well back in Poland. Why medicine? Why drug development? Why this path for you, do you think?
Well, that's a great question, and made me to reflect on that. So actually, I think the reason why I applied to medical school was actually my mom and her work. She had been a nurse working in the operating room, and I often visited her in the hospital. And I was fascinated by all these people in white coats, all the surgical tools and, things that go on there. So that really sort of made me think, even if in high school I was more interested in more technical or mathematics or physics, not biology and chemistry necessarily. So when I eventually got accepted to the medical school, I really enjoyed the first years there because they were so rich in basic science, chemistry, biophysics, biology. I really enjoyed that. So that's where I got hooked on science. And I actually started working in student association, doing some research during my studies. And that's what sort of took me to the PhD program, which was immediately following the medical studies.
Yes. Yeah. Interesting. So that those early days were very impactful, it sounds like.
Yes, and the PhD topic was in epilepsy. It just so happened that at my university, this area was particularly strong. Well published with top experts in the field. So I had the chance to work with those mentors and really, that fueled further my interest. So after PhD, I went abroad. First, I had a short postdoctoral training in Netherlands, in Nijmegen, but really the formative postdoctoral period was at NIH in Bethesda, where I worked again on epilepsy, on mechanism of action of anti-seizure drug, and certain neurotransmitter systems that are really important in epilepsy and other diseases of central nervous system.
Yeah.
So then, what drove me actually to industry was the realization that, this is where things happen. This is where you can really make impact on patients' life by bringing these drugs to market that change the diseases, that really alleviate the burden associated with the diseases. And back in 2007, I joined the UCB Pharma in Belgium.
Yes.
It was really a dream job for me, as I was, say, more of a seasoned postdoc, but still a junior scientist in a way.
Right. Yeah.
So I got this challenge to lead the epilepsy discovery effort at UCB Pharma, which at that time and still is an important player in that field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that was really, really exciting to me. I obviously had a very steep learning curve coming from academia to industry.
Yes.
and already leading a team of people there in a drug discovery setting. I enjoyed that tremendously. I've learned a lot. I spent actually 12 years there with UCB Pharma.
Absolutely.
In Belgium.
And I have a couple of questions about both of those periods. I mean, the NIH must be an incredible place to do some research, right? The amount of data, the facilities, the sort of the resources available and the people you surrounded with must have been an incredible experience.
Yeah, and especially at those days where when NIH enjoyed significant budget increases year on year. And as you say, really, you know, resources there, the caliber of people who are there are working in the intramural program as I did, or as external researchers and collaborators. This is fascinating. You know, one thing I really enjoyed and I truly miss is to go to the National Library of Medicine and browse through the volumes of journal. You know, we don't do that anymore. Everything is digital.
Right.
Believe it or not, it actually triggered some research topics that were, you know, coming from early papers in the 60s, which we picked on and followed and discovered new things. So this is really was been great period at NIH.
Yeah.
And also, you know, maybe I should say one thing that from the sort of formation perspective. My mentor, my postdoctoral mentor at that time, Dr. Michael Wagowski, really made sure that in our laboratory, we looked 360 from basic science all the way to patients and diseases. Sometimes we would go as far as sort of high school knowledge, really, you know, fundamental equation to that level of discussion, and then ending up, you know, in a specific disease condition. So having that continuity was really, really fantastic.
Yeah, no, I can imagine that. And it's interesting what you say about the serendipitous discoveries in the library. I think obviously, you know, our access to information is much greater than it's ever been, but some of those accidental moments, we don't get the chance to experience anymore, right?
Exactly. That's something that I made deeply.
Yes.
But on the other hand, you know, this wealth of information and our ability to harness it now and generate insights that are beyond a single person mind, this is equally exciting.
Yes.
And I also do have examples where, you know, applying these sort of modern technologies, natural language processing or AI tools, generated insights that were quite meaningful and hopefully will be successful in bringing new therapeutics going forward. So yeah, it's a different world.
It is. And I think, you know, we're starting to see the evidence of the potential of that, right? And it's, you know, we've got drugs in phase 2 studies now that are AI generated or, you know, are somewhat AI generated. I know there's some controversy over how AI generated some of these molecules are, but we won't get into that. And it's only getting more capable, this technology, and the speed at which we're advancing is unbelievable. I think, you know, I spoke to someone the other day about the fact that the first available version of ChatGPT came out less than 3 years ago. And the advance it's made in that time is incredible. And I don't think these things are going to slow down, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. But your transition to UCB, you moved into industry in a relatively large company, you know, not one of the big pharma companies, which came a little later, but a big company, with a very distinct culture. I know UCB a little bit, very distinct culture, into a leadership role straight away. So lots of changes. How did you go about adapting to that? What did you have to learn to be effective there, do you think?
Well, I think this has to do with my character, as I'm always very open-minded. I'd like to listen to ideas. I'd like to process and then provide feedback and leverage those ideas together. not being opinionated. I think it's a good thing. Although that we need to ask my coworkers. I'm not opinionated. Of course, I have my own biases and views,
Yes.
but I really like to listen and take the best. This was also, not only a challenge from the managerial perspective to me, but as you said, cultural perspective, company culture on one end. But at that time, UCB reminded me a little bit where Angelini is today, really going through that cultural transformation. The company has been deeply rooted in Belgium.
Yes.
Very much the employee base was largely Belgian. So for me coming in as a Polish guy, relocating from US, that was a bit of a learning curve as well.
I can imagine it. How's your Flemish these days?
Well, it's actually in the R&D center. It's in the Walloon region, French-speaking region.
Yes.
So I can tell you my Italian is better than French.
Fair enough. But I think, and it remains, as you said, you were there for 12 years. You did a few different roles during your time there. And it remains the case today, but certainly at the time, UCB was a very research-driven, large biotech company, right? There was a lot of very novel things happening there. Tell us a bit about your time there and I guess the things that you experienced there, the things that you learned there beyond the transition. What were the kind of key memories that you have of that time?
Yeah, so this was really exciting and challenging because the bar has been set very high. At that time, UCB was very well established with products on the market, quite successful products in epilepsy. So my task was to take it to the next step.
Yes.
I was also stepping in for a giant in that field, Dr. Henrik Klitgaard, who had been leading research in epilepsy at UCB before me. So feeling that phase was a bit of a challenge, and actually I was standing on his shoulders, which was very helpful, and he was being very supportive to me in that transition period.
Yes.
So back then, I think we brought in new discovery platforms, really establishing novel models that are more disease models than just symptomatic models that required also developing new technologies. And this was probably one of the things I really enjoyed the most in my life, is to work on this multidisciplinary team of mathematicians, algorithms developers, engineers, biologists, pharmacologists, to create a novel seizure monitoring technology, which now, all these wearable devices based on accelerometry, we've been working on that in the lab well before, this became so popular now.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and I can see the sort of progression from there. And you, as you say, you spent 12 years there. You then decided to go somewhere very large and move to Roche. Tell us about your time at Roche.
Yes, so indeed, I wanted to broaden up. It's indeed my passion and stronghold area has been in epilepsy, but I wanted to broaden up. And at UCB, maybe there were not too many possibilities to broaden up beyond that. So that was my driver to move to Roche, and indeed a much larger company that, with R&D budgets that are just mind blowing. Yeah. So this was really exciting, and I was leading what was called neurosymptomatic domain section. So that was actually kind of a novel concept for Roche, which has been so much focused on disease modification approaches. And I think it was a great move to at least explore that area, because there are symptomatic needs to this day that are not going to be addressed by disease modification.
Okay.
So that's what I was sort of involved. I had quite large group there with projects supporting using different therapeutic modalities. That was another interesting learning point, especially the RNA therapeutics, antisense oligonucleotide, when I had the chance to work with those projects for the first time. But at the same time, I noticed that probably like do matter, and this company is so big,
right?
And in a way, it's inert. And I'm very impatient, and so while you have these tremendous resources and great science, actually you don't see this being moved quickly enough to make an impact. And so that what drove me a bit out of Roche to join the biotech.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, and I think what we've seen sort of over the years is that if you're in one of these very large companies and you are driving one of the areas or one of the programs that fits in with the strategy and gets advanced and is a priority and things like that, that's one experience. But there's this whole portfolio construction activity that goes on, right, where good science can get left behind just because it doesn't quite fit with the portfolio, it doesn't quite fit with the strategy. And strategically, it makes sense, but it doesn't make it better for the person leading that group or leading organization.
Absolutely, that's part of the ingredient, or one of the ingredients of big pharma, where this endless portfolio prioritization discussion can be frustrating to people who work on projects and are so passionate and dedicated. And one day they learn, well, sorry, but actually with the so-called we,
yes,
the management decided to change course and this is deprioritized. That's certainly very painful. And but it has to be taken with the maturity, right? It's for the greater need of the business, and it's part of the game. So,
yes.
Yes.
So you moved on to something much smaller, which I imagine was probably. I would imagine some of the changes you probably expected, some of the changes you perhaps didn't. Tell us about that experience of going from Roche to OncoArendi as it was at the time.
Yeah. So that was, even if, as I mentioned, I was a bit impatient within the big organization, it's not that I saw myself moving out of Roche, soon. But I had the chance to participate in a conference in Poland, in Krakow, which was sort of industry academia type of event. And coming there, I realized how much is actually going on in Poland in the biotech sector. Being Polish, I actually didn't realize that before. So I became a bit more interested and mobilized my network there, and this opportunity to join OncoArendi, as we said, it was called at that time.
Yes.
Came about. And so yes, this was a biotech company, but one of the biggest biotech companies in Poland. Still is one of the biggest. Clinical stage, publicly listed, so quite a sizable company in the biotech space. The caveat being that company was not at all in neuroscience or neurology, so that was really add up with my background and experience. But they wanted me for another reason, is to reshape the R&D, build in some of the more robust decision-making processes, and take the program to the next stage. At that time, there was a phase 1 program that had some challenges. So I managed to take it across the finish line eventually, and that program was partnered with Galapagos, and this was what we were calling a historic deal, because it was the largest deal out of Poland with Western pharma company. So that was quite transformational for the company and made some headlines, and that obviously provided the financial capital to take the company to the next step and introduce novel technology platforms. Which I started before leaving OncoArendi, which actually rebranded itself to Molecule Therapeutics.
Yes, I saw that. So there's an interesting point in there that I guess is mostly for my own interest than anything else. But as you said, this was a different domain. This was a different disease area, a different type of program than what you'd built in your career to that date. And now you're running a large R&D group and you're constructing a team and doing all those sorts of things. How do you think about the importance of deep domain expertise as you're constructing an R&D group? And you know, as an executive, how important is it when you're building your team? Obviously, you have to have some experts, right? There has to be a level of expertise. But how do you tend to think about that at this point in your career?
Well, it is, of course, important. I think for me as a physician, it's been somewhat easier because I do have that medical background, even if it may be a bit rusty after 30 years, but still I can see, you know, the context.
Right.
And I think that is really important. Now, when you ask, is it needed to be an expert and dive into the nitty-gritty detail? Probably not. It's critical to have good people in the group that you can actually trust and rely, who are really experts in that field. And it's a healthy debate that you can have. You can sometimes ask naive questions, which are always good.
Yes.
But you know, you can also bring in sort of experience which, you know, these people might not have, especially when it comes to some of the questions in, you know, discovery, acceptability of target, you know, what you look at, quality of molecules and so on. Those things are somewhat disease area or therapeutic area agnostic. So I think it's very much complementary type of discussion that one needs to have.
Yeah. And I suppose building on that, there seems to be more understanding in medicine, but also in drug development, that there's very rarely such a thing as a cardiovascular disease or neurological disease or you know, whatever it might, kidney disease or whatever it might be. These things are all, it's part of a system, right? Does that change how you think then about R&D and you know, you talked about sort of the neurosymptomatic work that you did at Roche as well, which kind of has elements of that, I suppose, too. Does that change how you look at how you're developing drugs?
Well, I guess so. I mean, it's sort of difficult to factor in those elements as we so focus on certain therapeutic indication. But I think we more and more realize that, yes, this is a holistic system that we have, right? And, you know, things like microbiome, just to bring one example, right? So, you know, some years back, who would have thought that something happening in the gut may have impact on the brain, right? So that's just one area. The other, you know, all these inflammatory diseases, autoimmune diseases, which, you know, been systemic, but, you know, now we know how much is going on in the brain when it comes to inflammation and those mechanisms and how profoundly they can impact diseases. So yes, I think those moments, there's also this fascinating concept of neuroscience in oncology, right? So how brain interact or the tumors interact with the brain. This is really fascinating.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's a whole other world of things we could get into here. But so you've been with Angelini now for, I guess, around 3 years at this point, and you mentioned that the last 5 or 6 years has been quite transformative for the company. You also said earlier that it kind of reminds you a little bit of where UCB was, when you joined there. Tell us a bit about that. Tell us a bit about the journey the company's been on and is on at the moment.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, this transformative moment was the acquisition of the anti-seizure drug. Which really, you know, when you have a great product, that always helps because, you know, it mobilizes the team around the product, but it also helped to establish yourself in the field, and that's what really was a trigger moment. So when I was recruited, my task was really to build the pipeline, which wasn't the strongest at that time. It was more in the sort of life cycle management phase, really innovating around existing product.
Yes.
So that was my initial task to build in the pipeline, and we did some partnership deals with several companies now, mainly actually in Asia Pacific, which was quite interesting direction. So we've but there was also stemming from that acquisition. So the Rafal Therapeutics was a company that had a product from SK Pharma, so Korean company.
Mm-hmm.
But we took this to also discovery space, and so we signed a partnership deal with JPR Pharmaceuticals. That's a company that works and pioneers actually this very hot these days field of brain shuttle.
Right.
So transferrin receptor antibodies that bring in large molecules into the brain. So that's where we partnered that technology for specific therapeutic indication.
Yes.
Mainly in epilepsy and pain. And we have ongoing project there. Then I think last year we signed another partnership deal with a Korean company, this time PureVert, that had a small molecule that is targeting one of the key mechanisms in inflammation, oxidative stress. Very broad potential for the target, including epilepsy, and that's what we are focusing on now. And those discussions and bringing in new things are still going on. Just I think last week we announced another major partnership, and this time a more advanced asset with Grin Therapeutics, a biotech company in US. This is in rare epilepsy and neurodevelopmental diseases. And it's a phase 3 asset, so it takes us much further into the value chain. So within these 3 years, I think there's been a really great change in the pipeline.
Yes. So you've been busy. So I guess looking back on your career, Rafal, and we've talked about some of it. You talked about the open-mindedness has been a key factor, and kind of being very kind of seeking out different opinions has been crucial. But if you thought about the other things that perhaps have been key lessons through your career that you think have been particularly important, are there a couple of things that you'd point to that, I don't know, maybe you wish you knew at the beginning, or that you'd pass on as advice to someone who might be earlier in their career?
Well, absolutely. And, my key thing is that I often share with actually mentoring people, something I really like to do, develop and mentor people. One advice that I like to give upfront is, to have this ability to look 360, to look at the broader picture.
Yes.
Because I think scientists has this tendency to really zoom in on, one target, one biology area, and they kind of lose that big picture.
Yes.
In pharma industry, this is not the best thing to do because it limits you in that area. Those people, of course, are important and needed, but you can't really progress if you don't have that big picture view. And I think in pharma, it's also, one thing is the big picture in science and trends that you need to be aware of, but also to understand the business elements of that, to understand the broad unmet need and the broader economic environment that we operate in. So that's one thing I think it's important. The second thing is to have a bit of a longer term view on oneself. So and be actually aspirational in that view. And so that's something I've learned, and to sort of develop a bit of self-confidence. There's so many bright people who just like to box themselves. Oh, it's not for me. So I think you really need to open up and be ambitious about it.
Yes. It's really interesting. I had a conversation with someone yesterday he's a coach. He's a leadership coach, performance coach, that kind of thing. And we were talking about leadership, and he said, when I coach people who are moving into leadership positions, I always ask them, do you see yourself as a leader? And most of them say no. And the first thing he has to do is unpick that, right? And
exactly.
reposition that. But that's kind of what you're saying, right? Is that have a little confidence in that. I think scientists particularly, if you've done research, especially if you've done postdoc research or things like that, you've had to pitch for budget. You've had to put a business case together. You wouldn't call it a business case, but you've had to make a plan. You've had to execute against that. You've developed a lot of these associated skills, right? Outside of the very deep domain knowledge that you've developed. And I think a lot of people don't realize that they have those capabilities, even though they do.
Yeah. And maybe more on the softer side of things, that cultural awareness and the experience. I think many people have this transformative experience when they go first time to work abroad, even during studies or after graduation. I mean, when all of a sudden you find yourself in a completely different culture, very different language, very different views, that is tremendously enriching. And I think super important to be respectful of that and to draw the best thing from that you can then apply in your next step. And I think that's been a bit of a recipe that I've been following.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think it's incredibly important for people to work in a different country, whatever country that is. And you've probably you've moved a lot more than I have. You've had a very international career. But the first move's the hard one, right? After that, they get easier.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. No, look, it's fascinating. And, to finish up, Rafal, and I'm not asking you for any forward-looking statements here, don't worry. But we're recording this kind of early June 2025. Obviously, it's been a challenging period for the biotech sector, and there's been, lots of varieties of challenge. How are you viewing the sort of near-term future? Obviously, things are going very well at Angelini, but what's your view on where we're at as a sector?
Well, I remain optimistic despite all these challenges and this fluctuation that's natural, the bumps in the road. I think we remain united as a sector to really combat diseases and alleviate the unmet need. And that will never change.
Yes.
So that would give, motivation to us and hope to patients. And we see, quite some transformative changes, technologies, novel therapeutic modalities, AI, which we talked about. So those could be really transformative in R&D process. Also, industry as such, has been applying the lessons that's been learned, how to stay focused, how to really do rigorous decision making. So I think those eventually will pay off soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's a good point to end on. Rafal, thank you so much for joining us. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Tom, for having me again. I really enjoyed the conversation. And, got me to think even more about myself and the industry as that.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please like and subscribe and share it with someone else you think will benefit. And for more podcasts, videos, blogs and insights, come follow me, Tom Froggatt, on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, Medium or TikTok. See you next time.